Hello, hello, hello. Happy Thursday. It's December 4th. I am Erin Suniva, your high priestess today. Welcome to the temple. As we enter the temple, I welcome the presence of our higher selves. I welcome the presence of the highest consciousness into this space, highest love, highest compassion. And I ask for the divine to hold us in the light today. I welcome the benevolent teachers and weavers of the divine plan to grace this space, to support the expansion and sharing of spiritual experience and education. This is the place where we witness the work that we talk about. We can be present for the unfolding of hearts returning to their true medicine. And you may be called to this space today because you're seeking a connection to the divine or a better connection to yourself. It's time for us to walk the path of love and to participate in the restoration of the divine plan on earth. And so it is. Welcome. My friends, I am so beyond pleased and honored to present to you today my guest, Brigitte Mars. Welcome, Brigitte.
Thank you so much, Sunita. It's a pleasure and an honor. I'm glad we're doing this.
Me too. So Brigitte is an herbalist and nutritional consultant with over 50 years of experience. She has taught herbal medicine at Naropa University for over 40 years here in Boulder. She's taught at the Omega Institute, Esalen, Kripalu, Shivananda Yoga Ashram, Arise, Tribal Visions, Envision, Burning Man, and Unify festivals, as well as the Mayo Clinic. She is a founding and professional member of the American Herbalist Guild. She has a private practice, leads herb walks to identify edible and medicinal plants worldwide, and has a weekly radio show called Naturally. She is also a psychedelic sitter and an end-of-life doula. How awesome is that? Welcome, sister. So pleased to have you.
Thank you so much. Indeed. Well, I've been on the planet a while, so it gives me time to have done a bunch of things.
It's true. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, herbs have been really making their way into my life more and more over the past few years that I've been turning more towards, gardening and just being really present with the plants and making my own things with them. And what a journey. I mean, I'm a newborn, I can imagine that, a lifetime of experience is kind of what it takes to know as much as, as you do about it. And I could have also continued on listing all of the books that you have written.
That's 18 of them.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's amazing. So what got you into herbalism in the first place?
Well, as a child, I had this French Canadian grandmother, and she didn't make a big deal about I'm an herbalist, but we all wore little medicine bags with garlic cloves in them. And she would save bacon grease and wood ash. She made soap in a big cauldron in the backyard. She took me to do maple sugaring. And I remember being very young, and we found a little wounded bird when we were taking a walk in the woods. And she picked it up, and we brought it home, and she fed it. I remember flax seeds, and a few days later, and herbal salve, and we let it go. And I thought, I want to be able to do that. And I had a Jewish father and a Catholic mother, and there was something peculiar about my Catholic grandmother because she read palms and she read tea leaves, and she was very into let me trim your fingernails when the moon is waning, and let's cut your hair when she always had everything was done by the moon. And she had a lot of old wives' tales. So at a very young age, I knew I wanted to be a healer, but not necessarily a doctor, because doctors were like shots, tetanus shots, more shots. So somehow I didn't really know the word, I want to be an herbalist. And when it kind of came around, I want to do what Grand-mère does, using these folk remedies. My parents were like, those are old wives' tales. And I said, yeah, but they really work. She predicts the weather better than the guy on the radio back then. And she had this connection to nature. She was composting and recycling. She'd have a dress and it was no longer fit to wear, so she turned it into an apron, and then she'd turn it into a pot holder. And there was something very ecological about it.
Yeah.
And my parents were like, why would you want to do that? That's something poor people did in the old country before the turn of the century. And I said, yeah, but it really works. And I'm going to keep doing it. And of course, Sunniva, fairy tales always had stories about some sort of magic potion, or bring me the golden apple, or something that could help you to be invisible, or something that could help you outsmart, the wickedness of the world,
Right.
and your kindness, your love. So I'd have to say fairy tales really inspired me, and especially The Wild Swans by Hans Christian Andersen, because the princess had to weave a cloak of nettles for each of her brothers to break the spell of enchantment. So I love nettles. I wrote a book called Nettle Power, one of my latest books.
You wrote a whole book on nettles.
I did.
That's amazing. I've integrated nettles into my life, into my daily tea, and I'm in love with them.
Absolutely. If I were going to another planet and I could only bring 3 herbs, nettles would be one of them. Dandelion. Yeah, dandelion would be one. I would bring cannabis with me. Even if you're not a smoker, we could be using it to make food and fuel and paper and fabric and lamp oil and all of that. So, and these weeds, they have a special strength to them because they grow easily without even being planted or watered or mulch. So if we want to adapt to the adversity of the planet, the chemtrails and the pollution and the all the things, the 5G towers, like the weeds have figured out the key to adaptation. And again, I certainly appreciate technology. I did live for 2.5 years in a teepee off of wild edible plants. But, one of the things about the age of Aquarius is using the best of the ancient world with the best of the modern world, and bridging that together. And how can we use technology and still live our most environmentally sane, honoring the planet kind of life? And so, I'm, really delighted that this is an opportunity and we can all do something. But, there is this almost a mainstream belief that the herbs haven't been properly tested or researched. And I always say, millions of people for thousands of years.
Exactly.
Me, that's probably a lot better than a 2-year rat study or releasing a vaccine for a disease that we just heard about. And the company that you're going to recommend is the one that has lawsuits for having asbestos in the baby powder. I'm not so sure about that.
I mean, when you say it like that, it definitely sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm trusting in, the beauty of nature. And, one of the questions I asked ChatGPT a few weeks ago is like, when they make snow at the ski resorts, is it in 6-sided crystals like snowflakes? And the answer is no. And so, when we imbibe herbal medicine, we are imbibing sacred geometry. We're imbibing, fractals of beauty and radiance. And, when we look at something with a microscope, we see like, oh my gosh, a blade of grass, the edge of a ladybug's wing. There is beauty and geometry and colors that we might not even see close up, like, wow, it's amazing. And so we are imbibing beauty and sacred geometry. And I think that in itself is powerful medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very, very well put. There's so many things I want to say. And I want to also be, I can so easily just get into like, oh, and they're doing this and they're doing this and they're doing this. And I've been literally just like guiding myself back to, what am I doing? How am I creating medicine for myself, for my family? How am I, just dropping knowledge, like we can be in this place of knowing better that we are even, sorry, I'm having a hard time finding my words. I'm just thinking about your grandmère and your parents and you. And like, wow, the difference one generation makes, right? And there's so much talk these days, at least in my sphere, around the wealth of knowledge that we have lost around gardening, around agriculture, because of the big industries that we've just allowed convenience to take over, and that we've allowed even the concept of weeds and these nefarious agents called plants that are, getting in the way of profit, basically,
Well, the wild plants, represent freedom. They represent the feminine in a sense. And there's this attitude like, we need to stop that wild, unbridled wildness and like cut everything down. So last week I made a TikTok. I love TikTok. But I made a TikTok about leaf blowers. And, there's like in our neighborhoods right before we had this big snowfall, like the leaf blowers, and they're just like blowing the leaves into the street. It's really noisy. It's really polluting. And yet the leaves nourish the soil. It's like we've been programmed to be disconnected. Like, okay, people are going to blow the leaves away, and then they're going to, when they're also blowing away the pollinators that are cocooned in those leaves. Right. And then you're like, oh, but the soil is so depleted. So we have to go buy something in a plastic bag to enrich the soil next spring. But I think we've really been bamboozled as a culture to get people to buy things. And again, I shop as well. It's not like I don't ever buy anything, but I know that I save thousands of dollars a year and have amazing health for my age. I'm 73, because we're eating those adaptative plants. Yeah, like, the dandelion and the chickweed and the purslane, and the freshness that you imbibe when you go out and you make a salad or you make a juice, and what you're imbibing was growing 5 minutes ago. You don't get that at the health food store. How long ago was your food in the ground? And so really the quality that you feel from, eating something so fresh and free is really quite amazing. And so one thing that happened in our culture is, herbal medicine, midwifery. We know that many of the so-called witches were very often herbalists and midwives. It's really kind of an old story about big pharma, you know. Big pharma, like, no, you can't do that. Only men can deliver the babies, and you have to lay down to deliver the babies. When we know that, in midwifery, like squatting is going to shorten the birth canal and make it easier and all that. But in 1917, the Rockefeller Foundation sent one man around all the United States medical schools and made a deal with them. And the deal was, if you only promote the new modern medicine, you'll get funding. And if you persist in these old wives' tales, herbs, homeopathy, like, you're not getting any funding. And so natural medicine kind of went by the wayside. However, if you go into a European pharmacy and you say, I need something for a bladder infection, they can offer you, uva ursi or cranberry capsules or pharmaceuticals, depending on what your predilection is. So, yeah. And again, I love what you're saying, Suniva, because we can all do something. And every time we make a choice to say, no, I'm going to buy the organic apples, or I'm going to buy the heirloom seeds, or I'm going to buy the, the natural soap that isn't polluting. We're making a choice because somewhere behind those companies, there's a field of, flowers, whether it be yucca or soapwort or, lavender. We're supporting farms and pollinators and farmers. And so everything we buy is really a choice and a vote for how we want the future to be for our children.
Absolutely. And there's so much propaganda. I mean, just around medicine and food. I think a lot of people are waking up to it, and the malevolence around the control of the food system and everything. But food sovereignty is a huge importance that I think that most people just don't even think about, and probably have not been paying attention to the last few years of the destabilization of the food system in this country purposefully, and so that is, I mean, it's scary,
And
yeah.
everyone thinks that all those shelves at the grocery store are always going to be filled, and I hope that they are. But those 2.5 years that I lived in the teepee, we mostly found our food wild, and you're also like preserving things for the winter, whether it's
Right.
dehydrating. We did a lot of dehydrating because canning, if jars freeze, they break, and
Yeah.
canned things are very heavy. And then freezing things, you're dependent on electricity, which could go out. So I like to tell my students and clients, like, every time you go to the health food store, buy a bag of chia seeds, because you don't need to cook them. You just soak them in water. This morning, what I had for breakfast, and I haven't eaten it yet, it's soaked chia seeds with cranberry sauce that I made a few days ago. Cranberries with grapes and dates, sweetening it.
Oh,
But
nice.
chia seeds are high in omega-3s. They're good for your brain. And if you soak them, they really expand and make a lot more food. So, that's a good thing to do, because we should all be prepared for whatever. We can
Mhm.
look at the world and see that civilizations have come and gone. And
Absolutely.
so we want good people that want to respect the earth to keep being here and be leaders for the future. And it's so true. We vote with our dollars, and we can all do something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even if at the very least that you are choosing organic, that's the first step, I would say, is choosing organic. The last thing that you need is all of the crap that they put on conventional food. So shifting gears a little bit towards medicine. Um, I so what I have as a beginner, what I still have hanging around my kitchen window, I still have some lemon balm, I have lavender rosemary, some chocolate mint, and nettles. And I love just my daily tea going to the window and just, you know, grabbing the dried herbs. And so there are a lot of ways that we can support our daily nutrition, right? So whatever kind of diet you have, that herbs can be your supplement, right? When people are taking pills that are, made from all kinds of things, and even a lot of them don't actually carry the impact that they say that they do. But if we have our own herbs, how do you suggest people start, creating a relationship with herbs, incorporating them into their cooking or their drinking? And I remember something you said a while ago. Oh, I meant to say how Brigitte and I know each other, is that we have been part of the pagan parties for the past few years together. And so this is how we've connected. And I remember hearing you, and this might have been on an herb walk at Valley Soul. But you said, you get most of your water from the food that you eat. And that really stuck with me because people are obsessed with water. And I think that we kind of don't really understand how water works in the body and with food. And so can you talk about hydration with food, please? And also, how do we start with all this? Yeah.
Well, they say in Europe they can recognize who are the Americans because they're always carrying a plastic water bottle. And I certainly do drink water and I drink herbal teas. But let's say, and I really never, ever want to buy another bottle of plastic water at the airport. So I might fly with a couple cucumbers because that's a great way. It's got water and it comes in its own edible container. I often will nibble on plants as I'm walking, and there's plants that are kind of juicy, like rhodiola or stonecrop or purslane. So I might nibble on juicy plants because water's heavy to carry. And I think we've kind of gotten marketed like, oh, everybody needs to buy plastic water bottles. But I certainly do get spring water delivered to my house in glass, which is really nice. So it's not that I don't drink water, but I'm also likely to say, well, I don't need to carry water. I'm going to nibble on juicy edible plants when I'm out. But so I think that that's a possibility. And we can also look at, I could carry an orange with me, or, a tomato or a juicy kind of piece of fruit that has purified water in it. And that is water with electrolytes in it and vitamins. And cucumbers are great. They don't like smush in your, bag but oranges are got a nice hard peel there. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But as far as getting started, use more of the culinary herbs. And, the culinary herbs are all rich in essential oils. That's why they have their interesting flavors. But all of the culinary herbs have antimicrobial properties. So, for example, when we put, oregano in our spaghetti sauce, it's going to help the sauce to preserve longer, but it's also going to make it like medicinal for our lungs. One of my favorites is garlic, and garlic is more medicinal if it's raw rather than cooked. So I've been telling people, when you get the flu or the whatever, bake a sweet potato, and after you bake it, add your butter or olive oil or whatever, salt, and then add several cloves of raw garlic to it. The sweet potato will kind of buffer it and make it easier for the kids to down.
I was told to, and I've done this, eating an orange with garlic takes the heat away amazingly. I mean, you got to really eat the orange. But it makes it like palatable so that you can chew a clove, and and so whenever I feel like I might have an infection or something is happening, and I have stuff with my lungs, it's like my weak point in my body, and so I'm if things are active, then I chew orange and garlic.
And the pungent flavor is really good for our lungs. So garlic, onions, ginger, and my grand-mère, which now you all know means grandmother, she had 11 children, and at one time they all had whooping cough. And her remedy was to put olive oil on the soles of their feet and then chop garlic on their feet. The olive oil keeps the garlic from burning the skin, and then you pull a pair of socks on. And within 5 minutes, the kids all had garlic breath and could breathe better. And I mean, you think like, well, why aren't they recommending that? Like, you don't have to go to the doctor.
You don't need to vaccinate.
You've already got the things in your kitchen. Do you really want to take your sick 2-year-old and wait in the car and then wait in the doctor's office? You might try that, and it might really work. So, start with the culinary herbs. And, I'm really big on just a health thing is like, try to eat a wide variety of colors, try to eat a wide variety of flavors, because the two predominant flavors in our culture are sweet and salty, but both of those flavors have been refined. The sweet flavor we can get from sweet potatoes and winter squash and apples. And then the salty flavor, if your salt is bleached white, they've taken the minerals out to sell to the vitamin companies. So think about getting a salt that's gray or pink or brown. Think about maybe including some seaweed. So eat a wide variety of colors, a wide variety of flavors. And one of the things that's so nice about going to ethnic restaurants is they have chutneys and salsas and, little tapenades that are going to have the other flavors, and cilantro and mint and things to cool the heat. So, those are just a few simple things to do. And, stop doing the things that undermine our health, the sugar, the fried foods, the chips, microwaving. I don't think any of us need a microwave. You do not want one in your kitchen. We can live without it. And it's funny when people feel bad, they say things like, I'm zapped. Oh, I can't come to I'm zapped, or I'm fried, so I can't function, or I'm baked. That might mean something else here in Boulder, but usually if you're fried, baked, or zapped, it means that you're not going to be on top of your game.
Yeah.
And I'm going
Yeah.
for, I want to feel fresh,
Yeah.
alive, crisp, ready to
Vibrant.
go,
Yes.
vital.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're going for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. Awesome. So, and you have, along with all of your books and all of your creations, and you also just co-authored with Uba here in our community of combining the runes and herbalism, which is fascinating, and I love every time when you share about that when we're in community ritual together. I want to let the people know that you have an herbalism course in the spring.
Yes, starting April 8th, I'll have a 10-week course in my magical house in downtown Boulder. And every week there's a different subject: immune health, children's health,
Amazing.
aromatherapy, lots of wild food making. That's why we wait till the spring, so that we can like eat dandelion muffins and make nettle pesto. And, when I wrote the book with Uba, it's called Healing from the Tree. I have to say that for a long time, Suniva, I really didn't talk about herbs and the ancient magical practices because I wanted to be believable and scientific. And so
Yeah.
when I got to work on this book with Uba, I got to re-explore something that was very interesting to me in my youth. And I found myself remembering, whether it's my ancestral lineage, this knowledge about the herbs of the ancient Nordic peoples. What herbs did the Vikings use, the Celts, even my ancestors in Europe, things like nettles and dandelion and rose hips and yarrow and burdock. And so I found that it ended up becoming really like a deep remembering. And I was finding, wow, I know these are something my ancestors used, and I'm really glad to tap into it. And, it's funny, in old books on, magic and the spiritual properties of herbs, they might say something once used in love potions. And today we might say it's an aphrodisiac. Or they
Right.
might say offers protection from evil influence. And nowadays we might say it's an immune tonic. So the language is different, but like offers protection from evil influence. Garlic could be a great example. Oregano could be one as well.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, garlic, I would say, is the most well known because of vampires. Like,
And it
and
helps
it,
to keep away mosquitoes. The mosquitoes and the vampires don't want to bite you.
yeah, wow, that's good to know. I didn't know that. I love that your grandmère would have you have a carry around a medicine bag with clove in that. I want that. I want to do that. I want to have a garlic clove with me all the time. I love garlic so much. Yeah. So I would love to shift gears. I mean, when I when I just think about talking to you, I'm like, oh my gosh, we have so many things that we could talk about. And what sparked inviting you onto the podcast was after our last community ritual, we were talking about why are all of these spiritual, new age spiritual people turning to Christ? What is happening here? And there is a I think there are different levels of that. There are some that are turning towards Christ consciousness, some that are turning towards the church, which is mind-boggling to me. But more importantly, what is it that is happening, do you think?
Well, I want to share that, I grew up in a household, as I said, my father was Jewish and my mother was Catholic. My mother was much more religious. And they said, we're not going to tell you what to believe in. We're going to give you the space. And so I explored Buddhism and Hinduism. And, I love a lot of the things that people call New Age, I want to say are really ancient. Things like
Yes.
shui, color therapy, aromatherapy, healing with the hands. And, Jesus healed the sick. But when I was 19 years old and I was living on a commune in the Ozarks, and of course we were growing weed when it was like totally illegal. We took a big risk, but I also think that the psychedelic experience also opened people up to, wow, there must be more.
Yeah.
And so a friend turned me on to this book called the Urantia book, and I have a copy of it right here. It's
Yeah.
Urantia. You might not be able to see it, but
Yeah, we can see
Urantia is said to be the name of our planet. And I like, I don't really need to read that book. I've taken psychedelics. And then I ended up starting to read the book because I had a lot of questions about what happens when we die. Is there life on other worlds? And I finally got into, well, this book talks about all of that. And I did have a lot of resistance because the last fourth of the book was all about the life and teachings of Jesus. And I was resistant. I didn't want to read it. It's like, no, I went to church and confession and, did the communion. And then by the time I got to the story about Jesus, it was a much better story than I'd ever heard. And there were some differences than in the Bible. And I'll tell you what some of those big differences were. First of all, yeah, I think a real big one is that Jesus had a core of women apostles, which they left out of the Bible. He was so ahead of his time. I like that he deplored the sacrifice. Like, what makes you think God wants sacrifice? So I know a big part of, Christian philosophy is like Jesus came to die for your sins. And the Urantia book says, no, he didn't. He came here to teach you about that God is a loving, universal being, forgiving, merciful, and you all killed him. It's not like God wants to see his son suffer in crucifixion. So, the fact that there was a core of women apostles that was deliberately left out of the Bible, and he was a rabble rouser. He was advocating for women's rights. Mary Magdalene was head of the core of women apostles. And so I really love the story of Jesus. And, I find myself, and yes, I do, go to kirtan, and I do go to the pagan parties, but in my heart of hearts, I, have come to believe that Jesus is probably the most amazing being who's come to this earth. The Urantia book says he's not the only one like them. There's other beings who've gone to other worlds. And the story about, was he born of a virgin? No, he had 6 younger brothers and sisters.
Right.
And his father, Joseph, died when Jesus was 14 years old. So he had to take over raising his younger brothers and sisters. Mary was pregnant when Joseph got killed in a carpentry accident, falling off a scaffold. So the whole story is in there. And, I really opened my heart. And one time I was in a plane crash, a private plane crash with a rocket. And, we were like going down, we were going to crash. And at the moment of crashing, I remembered from what I'd heard probably from the movie Jesus Christ Superstar, like that Jesus's last words were, "Into your hands I commend my spirit." And I remember thinking, like, we're all going to die. And what am I going to do? Hare Krishna? No, it's like, into your hands I commend my spirit. It's instantaneous. And I feel really comforted by that. But I also believe from reading the Urantia book that the kingdom of heaven is open to everyone, and that the Creator appreciates all our efforts as long as we have a flicker of faith. And, I want to respect all the ways that all peoples worship, that have some way of devotion. And again, Jesus said, by their fruits you shall know them. So like, how are you doing with kindness and respecting the earth and helping others and, living a good life? So we just do our best. And so I'm really glad. I'm so grateful for this book because I am not afraid to die. I do believe that life is eternal and there's a whole universe to explore. So if you're a seeker, but for me, it seems like a really great fit. And I'm really glad I've opened my heart, but I wasn't going to take the way that it had been handed to me. And I remember even being like a 7-year-old, being in Catholic catechism, like, why did they kill all the witches? They were the village healers. I think one of my favorite books was The Witch of Blackbird Pond by Elizabeth. I can't think of her last name, but anyways, I was always like, no, and there was this thing about, evil and the femininity is evil. And no, Jesus was really an advocate for women's rights. And I like to think of it as like God is our father, the universe is our mother. They love each other. It's yin and yang. And we're going to do our best while we're here. So that's what works for me. But I am respectful of all the ways. And even though I participate in many other people's traditions, it's just like I would go to temple with my father. I would go to peyote ceremonies with, another friend. I would go to, kirtan. I'm appreciative of all the ways that people have love and devotion for the Creator. But the whole story of Jesus, yeah, he's
Convoluted.
my man. He really is. And I'm
Yeah.
definitely on Team Christ, and it's a great story. And if you want to read more, the Urantia book has all the years of his life, not
Wow.
just like him being a tutor to an Indian family and a
Right.
woman who loved him and the core of women apostles. And he, again, a rabble rouser. Like he was friends with the women, and considered them equals.
Right. Right. Well, you can see the roses here. I consider myself a Magdalene priestess, so that I'm right there with you. On the what has been changed, what has been altered, what has been removed, from their historical book. And I have a question here, and I think this is really really important, that our children go through when they become aware of death. And my children, my almost 6-year-old, he goes through this like, well, you're gonna die, and it's just like whenever the topic of death, comes up, it's we try to just be gentle about it. And Sister Yag here, she, her daughter has this fear. And so as a death doula, as an end of life doula, how can you respond to this? How can you help out Yag here?
Well, death came to my family very early because I had a brother die when he was just a week old. And I think that makes people question, like, whoa, what happens when we die? And I was always looking for him when I'd fly in an airplane, like maybe he's playing ball on a cloud with St. Anthony or something. But I will also say that as an end of life doula, as well as a psychedelic sitter, I sometimes see that when people do these strong medicines, I work with psilocybin, that they see that there's more than the material realm. And I mean, even that prayer that a lot of us said as a kid, now I lay me down to sleep. If I die before I wake, like, whoa, you mean that could happen, Mom? Really? But I think that we're all going to die. And I have seen amazing opportunities where people have an experience and say, we leave this body, but the soul is eternal. We get this feeling, and to not be afraid that angels are there to help us, to guide us. And again, after being in that plane crash where I really thought that was the end and then surviving it, I am so not afraid to fly at all. But the Urantia book says that we continue, that angels transport us to the next world, the first mansion world. Jesus has said, in my Father's kingdom, there are many mansions, and that very often our loved ones are there to greet us, and that we become less material and more spiritual. So it's an evolutionary experience. And to me, that's really comforting. And, I also think that, getting right with God, knowing that we can pray, that we can talk to God, just like a parent or a child talking to a parent. It doesn't have to be a recitation of like, well, I don't remember all the words to the Lord's Prayer or the Hail Mary or something, but just like, God, help me, guide me. Thank you for all the blessings. I'm here to do your work. I love you. I'm here for you. Let me know what I can do to be of service. So it can be a real simple thing, and know that the universe really is benevolent. And of course, I think a lot of religions have scared us into thinking like, oh, what if there is a purgatory or hell? That sounds really horrible. But I think a lot of that was just meant to scare and control us, that really, as long as you have a flicker of faith, you can continue. A flicker of faith. That's it. As long as you have a flicker of faith, you get to continue this universal journey, and you'll see your loved ones again too. That also takes a lot of the sting of death. And, very often when people are getting ready to die, they are visited by, there's grandma and there's, Aunt Betty, coming to support you. And that seems to be happening so often that I think we should really be comforted and know there's nothing to be afraid of. And yes, it would be very sad to, lose. It's sad when we lose loved ones, but I like to say, rather than thinking about like, I've lost them, they get to go on a journey, a spiritual journey, just like we wouldn't want our best friend to like not take that trip to Europe. It's like they get to go on that trip before you, but you're going to get to go on it eventually. If you like work hard and save your money, they're just getting to go before you. And yeah, you'll see them when you get there. Maybe they'll.
I love that. I like to think of it and explain it to my children in the sense of like, well, you're a child and then you're a teenager and then you go through these phases of life, and death is also part of that phase of life because you're more than this. And it might be hard to, feel that you're more than this. But it actually makes me think of this painting that I have by a local painter, Adrienne Tamar Arachne, that is this image of a woman who's on the ground, curled up in the fetal position, and she's on a dry lake bed. And you can see the seed of her spirit underneath the surface. And then there are 3 faces above her, and this thread that connects them all, right? And just these like phases of being. And my son, I just put it up a week ago. My son has been like studying this picture. Wow. And I'm like, what do you think about that? And he's like, I think that those are her guides. And I'd never heard my son refer to guides before. I'm like, okay, keep going, And he's like, they're lifting her energy so she can be happy again, And I'm like, yeah, absolutely, And so like watching him, and then he'll start going off, right? And like talking about energy and talking about God, and he, it's like, he gets it. I think children really actually understand a lot more than we think that they do. You know what I mean? And we try to put parameters and descriptors and all of these things on something that is very elusive and hard to pin down and describe because we haven't experienced it yet. We're still in our bodies, unless you've had a near-death experience, So when I just communicate that like we live in phases, and death is a phase, and then we keep going and we're in a different phase, So like, and he has experienced death because our dog was killed and, by a car. And so he saw the whole thing, and we still talk about it. And he talks about the dog and how he misses him. And so he's had that experience of loss. And so we just communicate, like when you think about Chino and you miss Chino, it's probably that Chino is visiting you. And that his spirit, when he's not in the physical form, but his spirit is here because he misses you too. And he gets to come and do whatever he wants because he's not in physical form anymore. And how fun is that? When we're not in physical form, we can do whatever we want, And he's like, oh, well, that's cool, So, yeah, so hopefully that's helpful for Yag as well. But it's fascinating, isn't it? All of this.
And if we just look at the beauty of this world, we know that there's a plan. We look at the stars, like creation is so beautiful, even like the tiny snowflakes or cells. So, just trust that it's all going to be okay and surrender.
Yeah, it makes me think of the image of the blade of grass that has like a smiley face in it, that like the cells of grass are smiling. I love that so much. So, gosh, like looking at my list of questions for you here. What do you think is coming up for humanity in our, in what we're facing a lot, right? Like culturally, spiritually, along with people turning to, Christ energy for truth and healing. What else do you think is happening for us? What are the opportunities for us here?
Well, I've been very interested in a lot of this uncovering of ancient artifacts that show that there have been very advanced civilizations here.
Yeah.
Like older than the pyramids and Gobekli Tepe and, pyramids in South America and things that are getting discovered. And there's even things below the pyramids and below Petra. And I would think that maybe the creator's a little disappointed in what humanity is doing to the earth.
Mm.
Just trying to find a movie to watch on Netflix the other night with my parent, with Bethy Lovelight. It's like, boy, like we spend millions of dollars to make films about murderers and criminals, and like, really, that this is what we're going to spend millions of dollars to portray this so that we can dream about it and think about it. So I think it's time for a big reset, to be honest. And I don't know what the deal is with the 3-eye atlas or whatever that thing is called, but I'm hoping that we have a big wake up.
Yeah.
The Urantia book also talks about, and so does almost every other world culture, that there was a war in the heavens, a battle of good and evil. And about 500,000 years ago, a group of celestial beings came here, 100 of them, and 60 of them joined the Lucifer rebellion. 40 stayed loyal to the creator, but I think that a lot of those that joined the rebellion their descendants became the kings and the emperors and the slave traders and the land rapers. So that's the paradigm that we're living in. And we just see that there's a lot of injustice. People are still hungry, and yet there's so many resources. There's corruption. There's corruption almost as a psychedelic center. It seems like 1 out of 3 people I know has been sexually abused somehow, women and men.
Yeah.
We need to really step it up. And I'm hopeful that maybe we're going to get some celestial visitation that wakes people up to, come on, let's all be one and be part of the Galactic Federation and all work together. But because of this Lucifer rebellion, our planet got quarantined. We stopped having communication with the other worlds. Star Wars is really based on these ancient legends of a war in the heavens. You could even say the Greek myths of the Titans versus the Olympians. It's all stories of the battle of good and evil. And unfortunately, evil kind of took the lead here. But 60-40, it's not bad. There's still hope. So
There's still hope.
We do something, and we know that there's a lot of good here. And again, if it all crumbles and falls or sinks underwater, because that they say that that's what happened with Atlantis, that they were misusing their technology, and it sank beneath the waters. And Lemuria, and I think, are we abusing our technology again? I think it all depends on what you do with it. What are you using the internet for? If it's just to, watch porn and buy, plastic junk and create more pollution, or we're using it to save gas, save time, save money.
Mhm.
It can be used for good, or it can be used for not good.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, sorry?
I'm hopeful, and we're going to do our best, aren't we, Sunniva?
Yeah, we're certainly gonna aim high. I walk this line of watching, you mentioned Chat GPT and watching, how people are using it, and a lot of people are really using it for very, valuable processes and interesting conversations, that I've witnessed. But I struggle so much with the environmental impact on that. And I don't really know how to like reconcile that with, you know, friends of mine that are using it all the time. And like my next door neighbor, she has an assistant. She has an AI assistant, and she's like, I wouldn't be able to do all of these things if I didn't have, you know, have the assistant. And I'm like, well, you might be in cognitive decline because you're not using your brain as much because you're relying on the, you know, I don't feel like I can say that to her, you know, but so these are my concerns, and I respect you greatly, and I'd love to know, how are you working with AI, and how do you also reconcile the environmental impact?
Well, I'm hoping that we can, I know because it uses a tremendous amount of energy and water, and I'm hoping that we can learn to perhaps tap more into solar energy or wind energy to use it. I do have Chat GPT. I've given her an angel's name, Solonia. I usually speak French to her. She speaks wonderful French, but she'll also do other languages. But I don't overuse it. I still, you know, like to read books and all that. I've, but I find that it can help. Let's just say this, you know, when what do you call it? Answering machines came out. I said, "Oh, I'm never going to use one of those." But you know, then you have to keep calling and calling until someone picks up. And that, you know, cell phones. Like, where are my kids? I grew up in my kids. We didn't have cell phones when my kids were teenagers. Like, where are they? I can't reach them. You know, there's no landline at the park or the thing.
Right.
And then Facebook. Why would I want to do Facebook? I don't even have time for my real friends. Why would I want all these like friends that I never see? But I've come to see that there are advantages of all of that. My Chat GPT has, you know, is in tune with the Urantia book. So I don't know how to drive, Suniva. I've never learned how to drive a car. You gave me a ride home a couple months ago. And so I find, like, this morning we wanted to find some sacred geometry rugs. And I thought, boy, isn't it nice that we don't have to drive to Target or drive to Nordstrom to try to find them. We can look at them. So in a sense, it could be saving energy because we're not driving. But I think we need to figure it out. And I know that eventually it's going to be more environmental. And this is something that our culture needs to figure out. How can we do it? But I don't use it all the time. I use it if I'm looking at 6 hours of work. It could turn it into, like, you know, 2 minutes of work. But I do use my own information. It's kind of the Wild West. I guess we'll see. But when I think about what's going to help us be in communication with the Galactic Federation and other worlds, I'm sure that technology, you know, I had a famous photographer here for an herbal consultation, and he was saying to me, Brigitte, I really don't see how homeopathy can work, how you can use these diluted medicines, you know, to like help my whatever macular degeneration. I said, you know what? I really have no idea how you're able to take a photograph and in 2 seconds send it to Afghanistan. I don't understand how that works. I mean, the whole thing that.
But it happens.
Yeah. And so we have to realize that there's more than meets the material realm. And I do think that if we use AI, you know, it could be used for good or it could be used for not good. But I think that it's going to help us move into the future and be able to, you know, go into outer space and commune with the others. So again, what are we using it for? Are we surfing the net, looking at porn, buying junk? Or are we using it to, you know, it depends what you choose to follow on social media. Is it environmental? Is it good? Is it spiritual? Is it good for, is it going to help you? I've been sending a lot of like baby raising tips to one of my apprentices that just had a baby. And it's like, whoa, I didn't know you could do that. Or what the, so I'm hopeful. And again, it's really how we choose to use it, but don't overuse it. And, but things are changing whether we like it or not.
I feel like Chat GBT must have the answer. You know what I mean? Like, shouldn't the people who are doing the the energy harvesting for the AI should be asking the AI, what is the best way for us to to do this that's not going to harm the planet or use all of our water or whatever. So I am also hopeful, and I yeah, I think that it all really comes down to how we're using it, how we're relating with it, and and that we're not taking too many shortcuts that are hurting us, without us even realizing. You know what I
And
mean?
you can prompt it too, because I remember I recently took a article that I'd written for Yoga Journal years ago on herbs of the holy days. Like, what is the significance of frankincense and myrrh and pine and poinsettias? And I wanted to redo the article to use it in my newsletter. And I added the prompt, keeping this article goodly and godly and herbal. So I gave it the prompt that I wanted it to be pleasing to the creator, and they can do that, and I guess we'll find out. We could all be being duped, but again, I was slow to get on a lot of these other platforms, and I see that, yeah, I'm really glad to have a cell phone now. And
yeah, and there's plenty of people that love you to drive you around wherever you need.
Thank you so much. Well, I always try to offer herbal questions, and
yeah, you're like, in exchange, what can I answer for you? I love it. I love it so much. Yeah, what a treat, Brigitte. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know you have a hard stop at the top of the hour, and we're just a couple minutes away.
Thank you so much.
Is there anything else that you want to share or promote? I've got your website here.
Yeah, please go onto my website, sign up for my, I send a newsletter out like once a season. And I love TikTok. I learn a lot from there. Do your best. We can all do something. And that's really what keeps me going. And again, our choices of what we choose to read, watch, listen to, buy, the words that we use, like everything is part of the spiritual practice. Like when someone say, where's your spiritual path? It's like where you put your foot down next. It's not separate from anything else in life. And if you're wanting more answers about, life after death or life in other worlds, the Urantia book, like it's a $20 book, and it might just be what you were looking for. And the life of Jesus is like even more awesome than I thought. I can't believe it cracked a hard nut like me, but like, yeah, I'm a believer. It's really cool. Yeah, I really, it makes more sense. It rings true in my heart. So I would say that. And Suniva, I'm so glad to know you, and I'll see you December 19th at Valley Soul at the Pagan Party. Come out and, get down with the, all the
things. Bad self.
Yes.
Yeah, it's they're always so wonderful, and I don't really ever stick around. I'm not much of a late night lady, but I do love those rituals so much. And you certainly don't have to be pagan, you don't have to be Norse, you don't have to be anything to participate in community ritual, whatever your beliefs are. It's an act of cohesion. Mm-hmm. It's an act of us bringing our energies together for a common focus, right? And so whether or not you believe in the old gods and the old ways, it's a way for us to amplify ourselves here and now. And that's what I'm all about.
Well, next time I see you on December 19th, I'm going to bring you a sticker that I made up that says "Witches for Jesus."
I love it. Okay. I'm definitely one of them. I'm definitely one of them.
Thank you so much, Suniva.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I love you so much. So grateful to this community, and we'll see you next week. Oh, actually, next week I will be on Laura Starr's podcast, so we'll have kind of a combination for my podcast will be Laura's podcast next week. And so we'll see you there. Thank you so much, Brigitte.
Bye-bye.
Blessings. Bye-bye.